Have you ever wondered what it feels like to discover that your own child sees you as nothing more than a walking ATM? To realize that the love you thought was unconditional was actually just a carefully orchestrated business transaction? My name is Renata, and at 71 years old, I learned the most painful yet liberating lesson of my life. This is the story of how my son and daughter-in-law tried to have me declared mentally incompetent to steal my life savings, and how I fought back to reclaim my dignity. The phone call that changed everything came on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning. I had dialed Max, my only son, to ask about his upcoming wedding plans. I was excited, having already purchased a beautiful pink dress for $200, thinking about how lovely I would look in the wedding photos. I had been setting aside money for weeks, planning to give them $1,000 as a wedding gift. I had even called my sister Diana in Chicago to share the wonderful news. But when the phone was answered, it wasn't Max who spoke. Instead, Lena, my daughter-in-law, looked me straight in the eye with a smile so cold it could freeze blood and delivered words that would haunt me forever. "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Special people. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. For 3 entire years, I had been their financial lifeline. I had paid their monthly rent of $500 without fail. Every stick of furniture in their apartment had been purchased with my money. When their refrigerator was empty, I filled it. When they needed help, I was there with my checkbook open and my heart even more open. Yet somehow, in their eyes, I wasn't special enough to witness the most important day in my son's life. I stood there in my own living room, the phone feeling impossibly heavy in my hand, watching my son avoid my gaze while Lena made herself comfortable on the sofa that I had bought for them. The pink dress hanging in my closet suddenly seemed like a mockery, a symbol of my naive belief that I was actually part of their lives, rather than just their personal bank account. Max finally raised his eyes and spoke in a voice that sounded rehearsed, mechanical. "Mom, it was an intimate affair, very small, just the two of us and witnesses." But I knew he was lying. Social media doesn't lie, and I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. There were Lena's parents, beaming with pride as they posed with the bride and groom. Her siblings were there, raising champagne glasses in celebration. I saw Lena in her white wedding dress, the very dress I had helped pay for with the $800 I had given her the previous month for what she called personal expenses. Everyone who mattered to them was there. Everyone except the woman who had made it all financially possible. What happened next was weeks of silence, weeks of me trying to process the humiliation while maintaining the automatic transfers that had become as regular as sunrise. Then, exactly 7 days after that devastating phone call, my phone rang again. This time, Lena's voice had completely transformed. Gone was the confident woman who had casually excluded me from her wedding. In her place was someone desperate, almost pleading. "Renata," she said, her voice trembling with what sounded like barely controlled panic. "The rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us and says if we don't pay this week, he will evict us. You forgot to make the transfer." I sat in silence, memories flooding back of all the times I had rushed to the bank to make those transfers. All the times I had canceled my own plans to ensure they had a roof over their heads. All the meals of beans and rice I had eaten so I could afford to fund their desires and whims. And now, after excluding me from the most significant moment of their lives, they had the audacity to call me as if nothing had happened. That's when something inside me finally snapped. "Lena," I said with a calmness that surprised even me, "didn't I tell you that I only help special people?" The silence that followed was so profound I could hear my own heartbeat. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one trembling. She was. "Renata, I don't understand," she stammered. "We've always been special to you. You're like a second mother to me." The lies came wrapped in that sweet, manipulative voice she reserved for when she needed something. The same voice she had used to ask me for money for the wedding dress, for their honeymoon, for the rings, all of which I had helped finance without ever knowing I would be excluded from seeing them exchanged. For years, I had lived with the constant anxiety of walking on eggshells, carefully weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping to earn even a crumb of genuine affection from my own son. I had played the role of the perfect mother, the accommodating mother-in-law, the silent provider who never complained when they treated me as if I were invisible. But those 4 words, only special people, had awakened something in me that had been dormant far too long. I did the math in my head, calculating every dollar I had spent on them over those 3 years. Between rent payments, groceries, gifts, emergency expenses, and their various whims, the total was staggering. Over $20,000. $20,000 taken from my retirement savings, from the nest egg my late husband had left so I could live my final years in peace. And what had all that money bought me? The privilege of being treated like a stranger on my own son's wedding day. That night, after hanging up the phone, I sat on my bed and wept. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of accumulated frustration, of years of silently endured humiliation. I cried for all the times they made me feel that my love was a burden, my presence an inconvenience, my money the only valuable thing I had to offer. I cried for the foolish woman I had been, for the mother who had lost herself trying to be indispensable to those who considered her disposable. When I woke the next morning, something fundamental had shifted inside me. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal anymore. It was something deeper, colder, more resolute. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, looking at the same tired eyes that had reflected years of giving love without receiving it in return. But there was something new in my gaze now, a hardness I didn't recognize, a determination that had been buried under years of compliance and people-pleasing. I went to the kitchen and made my morning coffee, just as I had done every day for 40 years. But this time I didn't reach for my phone to call Max and ask how he had slept. I didn't check for messages hoping for an apology for the previous day's humiliation. For the first time in a very long time, I made myself my own first priority of the day. I sat at the kitchen table where I had so often planned surprises for them, counted money for their expenses, and cried silent tears when they treated me with indifference. Today, this table would witness something entirely different. I pulled out my checkbook and bank statements, determined to see in cold, hard numbers the full extent of my own foolishness. Monthly rent payments of $500 multiplied by 36 months equaled $18,000. Food and household supplies at approximately $200 per month added another $7,200. Birthday presents, Christmas gifts, anniversary presents totaled at least $3,000. Lena's medical emergencies had cost me $800. The car loan they never repaid was $2,500. Repairs to the air conditioning unit in their apartment cost $600. The living room furniture set had been $1,200. The grand total was $33,400. $33,400 of my husband's inheritance, my pension money, the savings I had accumulated penny by penny through decades of honest work. All of it thrown away to keep 2 perfectly capable adults comfortable, adults who couldn't even pretend to respect me. My phone rang and I saw Max's name on the screen. Normally, my heart would have pounded as I rushed to answer, hoping he would finally apologize and explain that everything had been a terrible misunderstanding. This time I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, then fall silent. I continued sipping my coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later it rang again. This time it was Lena. I let that one ring too. A text message arrived from Max. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk." I deleted the message without replying. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I decided to take a walk. I hadn't done that in months without a specific purpose, without some errand related to their needs. It was always the bank for transfers, the supermarket to buy them something they required, the pharmacy for Lena's medications. Today I walked simply because I wanted to. I passed by the park where I had often taken Max as a child, remembering that sweet boy who would hug me tightly and say I was the best mom in the world. When had he transformed into this man who treated me like an ATM with feelings? When had I started confusing love with money? When did I begin believing I had to purchase my own son's affection? At the bank where I had made countless automatic transfers, I stopped in front of the entrance. Mr. Klein, the branch manager, spotted me through the glass and waved. He had known me for years and had processed every single one of my transfers to Max and Lena. He had watched my account drain month after month to fill theirs. I walked directly into his office. Mr. Klein, I told him, I need to cancel all the automatic transfers I have set up. He looked at me with surprise. For 3 years, these transfers had been as predictable as clockwork. Are you sure, Mrs. Richter? Has something happened? His concern was genuine, more genuine than any interest Max had shown in me in recent months. What happened is that I finally opened my eyes, I replied. I want to cancel everything, and I also need information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money. While Mr. Klein processed the cancellations, my phone didn't stop ringing. Max, Lena, Max again. It was as if they had developed radar to detect when their income source was in jeopardy. I turned the phone off completely. Mrs. Richter, Mr. Klein said as he handed me the paperwork. I apologize for intruding, but in all these years, I've watched you be extraordinarily generous with your family. I hope you're not being pressured to make these changes. His words touched me profoundly. This man, who barely knew me beyond banking transactions, showed more genuine concern for my well-being than my own son had in months. I'm not being pressured, Mr. Klein. On the contrary, I've finally stopped pressuring myself. When I left the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I had left an enormous burden in that office. For the first time in years, my money belonged entirely to me. I had no financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource rather than as a human being. I drove home thinking about all the things I hadn't done in order to please Max and Lena, the trips I hadn't taken to save money for them, the friendships I had neglected because I was always available for their emergencies, the hobbies I had abandoned because every dollar I spent on myself was one less dollar for their needs. When I arrived home, I discovered 3 cars parked in front of my house. Max's car, Lena's car, and one I didn't recognize. Through the windows, I could see movement inside my house. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I had given them keys because I trusted them, because I thought they would one day care for me just as I had cared for them. I took a deep breath before opening the front door. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. The scene that greeted me is one I will never forget. Max sat on my sofa with his head buried in his hands. Lena paced back and forth like a caged animal. An older man I didn't recognize was rifling through papers on my dining table. My papers. My personal documents. What is happening here? I asked, my voice sounding louder and more authoritative than I had expected. All 3 turned to look at me as if I were the intruder in my own home. Lena spoke first, her voice carrying that desperate urgency I had already heard on the phone. Renata, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Fisher is from the law firm we consulted about your situation. My situation? The question emerged with a calmness that surprised me. What situation? I'm doing perfectly well. Max finally lifted his head and looked at me with eyes that once belonged to an innocent child but now reflected only financial panic. Mom, we went to the bank and they told us you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Klein explained that you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that. Mr. Fisher, a man in his 50s wearing a gray suit and a smile that inspired no confidence, approached me with an outstretched hand. Mrs. Richter, I'm Dr. Fisher, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and have asked me to assess the situation. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I walked directly to my dining table and gathered all my documents that he had been reviewing without my permission. These are my private papers. You have no right to examine them without my consent. Mom, Max interrupted with that condescending tone he had perfected in recent years. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First, you financially cut us off without explanation. Then you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help. Lena approached and tried to take my hand with that fake tenderness she reserved for moments when she needed something. Renata, sweetheart, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you realize. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal. The word confusion echoed in my head like an alarm bell. Now I understood why they had brought the lawyer. This wasn't about helping me. This was about declaring me mentally incompetent and seizing control of my finances. The same woman who had told me they only invited special people to their wedding was now treating me like a senile old woman. I am not confused, I said with a firmness that silenced everyone in the room. I am clearer than I have been in years, and you are all going to leave my house right now. Mr. Fisher interjected with that professional voice lawyers use when they want to sound reasonable. Mrs. Richter, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is compromised. They have documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors? The laugh that escaped from my throat was harsh, almost cruel. Like what? Deciding that my money belongs to me? Choosing to no longer finance the lives of two adults who treat me like garbage. Lena reacted as if I had physically struck her. We never treated you badly. You're part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We're just expediting the process. There it was. The naked, unvarnished truth. Everything I owned would belong to them eventually. In their minds, I was already dead, and they were simply collecting their inheritance in advance. It didn't matter whether I had 70 years left or 70 days. To them, I was just an ATM with legs that had become problematic. Out, I said, pointing toward the door. All three of you get out of my house. Max stood up with that angry, childish expression he made when he didn't get his way. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off from one day to the next. I can't. My voice rose for the first time in the entire conversation. Who says I can't? For years, I've paid rent on property that isn't even in my name. I've stocked a refrigerator in a home where I wasn't welcome. I've financed a life that clearly had no place for me. Mr. Fisher removed a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my table. Mrs. Richter, we've prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Max and Lena to manage your finances more efficiently. This would be temporary, just until you feel better. I picked up the folder and without even opening it, threw it directly into the trash can. The only transition happening here is your transition to the front door. Lena began to cry, but these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration, of barely contained rage. You can't do this to us, Renata. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things. We took on financial obligations because we knew we could depend on you. Obligations based on my money, I replied. Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company. Just on my money. And now that I've decided my money is better invested in my own life, I'm suddenly a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship. Max tried to approach me, but I stepped back. He was no longer the boy who ran into my arms when he had nightmares. He was a 35-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle between himself and a comfortable life financed by others. Mom, we made mistakes, he said in a voice designed to sound remorseful. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Lena was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you'll just be reasonable again. Reasonable? The word tasted bitter. Being reasonable means continuing to pay for your life while you treat me like a stranger? It means pretending it doesn't hurt to have been excluded from the most important day of my only son's life. Mr. Fisher packed his papers with the efficiency of someone accustomed to having proposals rejected. Mrs. Richter, this isn't over. Your family has legal options. If you are indeed making irrational decisions due to mental health problems, a judge can determine that you need guardianship. His words were like a physical blow. I realized this wasn't just a manipulative family visit. It was a genuine legal threat. They wanted to have me declared incompetent to manage my own affairs. Mr. Fisher, I said, looking him directly in the eyes, I suggest you research thoroughly before threatening a 71-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years, who raised her son alone after her husband's death, who ran a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who until last week financially supported two completely capable adults. Lena stopped crying and looked at me with a coldness that finally revealed her true nature. This won't end like this, Renata. We have rights. We have lawyers too. Perfect, I replied. Hire all the lawyers you want. With your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums. All three walked toward the door with the wounded dignity of people unaccustomed to being told no. Before leaving, Max turned to me one last time. Mom, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to wind up alone with no one to take care of you when you really need it. Max, I said with profound sadness but also crystal clear clarity, I'm already alone. The difference is that now it's by my own choice, not through your neglect. As I closed the door behind them, I stood in my living room surrounded by the most beautiful silence I had heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night I couldn't sleep, not from sadness or regret, but from the adrenaline of having reclaimed control of my own life. I lay awake planning my next moves like a general preparing for battle. If Max and Lena wanted a fight, I would give them a war. But it would be a war fought with intelligence, not emotion. At 6 in the morning, I was already dressed and ready. My first stop was the office of attorney Mr. Weber, a man I had met years earlier when handling my husband's estate. Unlike Mr. Fisher, whom Max and Lena had brought, Mr. Weber had an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting elderly rights. Mrs. Richter, he said after I explained the situation, what your children attempted yesterday is more common than you might think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. The fact that they entered your house without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation. His words both calmed and concerned me. They calmed me because they confirmed I wasn't losing my mind, that what had happened was genuinely abusive. They worried me because I realized the situation was more serious than I had thought. We need to document everything, Mr. Weber continued. Every transfer, every gift, every instance of them pressuring you for money. We'll also modify your will to protect your assets from future manipulation attempts. We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Mr. Weber whistled when he saw the total. $33,400 in 3 years. Mrs. Richter, with this money, you could have lived comfortably, traveled, enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding. When I left Mr. Weber's office, I had a comprehensive plan. First, change all the locks on my house. Second, install a security system with cameras to protect against future surprise visits. Third, open a new bank account at a different institution where they had no connections. Fourth, start living the life I had postponed for years. My next stop was the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Summer, had known me for years because I was constantly buying things to repair Max and Lena's apartment. This time was different. Mrs. Richter, what brings you here today? Another emergency with your son? He asked with the familiarity of someone who had silently witnessed my wasted generosity. No, Mr. Summer. This time it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want them to be the highest quality available. He looked surprised but asked no questions. While I was selecting the locks, his son Ethan, who installed security systems, happened to stop by. Felt like divine intervention. Ethan, I told him, I also need surveillance cameras installed, a complete system. Price is no object. While they prepared everything for installation the following day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Lena calling from someone else's phone because I had blocked her number after the previous day's confrontation. Renata, it's Lena. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults. Speak, I said curtly. Listen, I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Max and I have discussed it and we want to make it up to you. How about we have a special dinner to celebrate our marriage with you? We could do it at your house, cook together like we used to. The manipulation in her words was so obvious I almost laughed. Lena, how much rent do you owe exactly? The silence confirmed I had struck a nerve. Well, it's 2 months. $1,000 total. But I'm not just calling about that, Renata. We really miss you in our lives. Do you miss me or my money? I asked directly. Both, she replied with surprising honesty. Renata, I won't lie to you. Yes, we need your financial help, but we love you too. You're important to us. If I'm so important, I said, why wasn't I important enough to attend your wedding? Why am I not important enough to receive a phone call that doesn't involve asking for money? When was the last time you called just to ask how I was doing? Another silence. We both knew the answer. Never. Lena, I'm only going to explain this once. For 3 years, you've treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me. You ignored me. You humiliated me. Finally, you insulted me in the worst possible way. Now that the money is drying up, you suddenly discover that you love me. Renata, please. I cut her off. There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough for your wedding. Now I'm making mine. I hung up and turned off the phone completely. I didn't want any more interruptions in my day of liberation. That afternoon, I went to the beauty salon I hadn't visited in over a year. I had always canceled appointments because Max or Lena needed something urgent, or because money I had set aside for myself became emergency funds for them. Mrs. Richter, my favorite client, called out Cynthia, my preferred stylist. What a surprise. I thought you'd forgotten about us. I didn't forget you, Cynthia. I just forgot that I deserved to be pampered too. I treated myself to the complete package: cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty. While Cynthia worked on my hair, she told me about her life, her children, her dreams. It was refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around Max and Lena's needs. You look beautiful, Mrs. Richter, she said when finished. But more than that, you look liberated. Did something wonderful happen? Yes, Cynthia. I finally learned to say no. When I arrived home that afternoon, there was an unfamiliar car parked outside my house. My heart raced momentarily, thinking Max and Lena might have returned with reinforcements. But as I approached, I saw an elderly woman sitting on my front porch steps. Mrs. Richter? She asked as I got out of my car. Yes, that's me. How can I help you? I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never had a proper chance to talk. Yesterday I heard raised voices from your house, and I was concerned. Is everything all right? Her sincere concern touched me deeply. Here was a virtual stranger showing more interest in my well-being than my own son. Come in, Mrs. Brooks. I'll make coffee and tell you a story you won't believe. While I brewed coffee, I recounted the entire situation. Eleanor listened without interruption, occasionally nodding. When I finished, her eyes were filled with tears. Mrs. Richter, she said, you did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I also thought it was my duty to finance her adult life. I also believed they wouldn't love me if I didn't provide money. What happened? I asked. I cut off the funds when I realized they only contacted me when they needed something. Initially, it was terrible. They threatened me emotionally, blackmailed me, tried to make me feel guilty. But after 6 months, my daughter called with a genuine apology. Now we have a real relationship based on love, not money. Her words gave me hope and confirmed I had made the right decision. Do you think Max and Lena will understand eventually? Maybe yes, maybe no, she answered honestly. But that's no longer your responsibility, Mrs. Richter. Your responsibility now is to live your own life. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without worrying about whether Max and Lena had money for rent, food, or their various whims. I went to sleep thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, Ethan and Mr. Summer arrived at 8 o'clock to change the locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone rang continuously from unknown numbers. Lena was still attempting to reach me from different phones, but I had developed a new skill, completely ignoring calls that didn't serve my interests. Mrs. Richter, Ethan said while installing the cameras, this system will give you complete peace of mind. You can monitor who's approaching your house, even when you're not here, through your phone. If someone enters without permission, an alert is automatically sent to police. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was installing security to protect myself from my own son, but it didn't hurt as much as it once would have. It was simply a practical measure to maintain my newfound peace. While they worked, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Call my sister Diana in Chicago. We had lost touch because every conversation had become me talking about Max and Lena's successes, about how much money I had spent on them, about how proud I was to help them. I now realized our conversations had become financial reports disguised as family news. "Renata," Diana answered, surprised. "Sister, how are you? We haven't spoken in months." "I'm well, Diana. Better than well. I'm calling to tell you I've finally come to my senses." I told her the complete story from beginning to end. The secret wedding, the humiliation, the visit with the lawyer, my decision to cut off funding. Diana listened in silence, and when I finished, her response surprised me. "Renata, sister, it was about time. Every time we spoke, it broke my heart to hear you boast about how much money you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you something but didn't know how." "What did you want to tell me?" "That Max never spoke lovingly about you at family gatherings. It was always my mom helped me with this or my mom bought me that, but never I miss my mom or I love my mom. It was as if you were a service provider, not a person." Her words stung, but it was necessary pain. Like when a doctor cleanses an infected wound, it hurts, but it's part of healing. "You know what else I noticed?" Diana continued. "Lena always spoke about you in future tense. When Renata is no longer here, we can remodel her house, or when we inherit, we'll invest in the business. As if they were waiting for you to die to really start living." This revelation hit me like ice water. They didn't just see me as an ATM. They saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and their money. While I was trying to make them happy, they were planning their future without me. After talking with Diana, I sat in my kitchen processing all this information. Years married to a man who truly loved me, 35 years raising my son alone after my husband's death, and 3 years financing 2 adults who saw me as a $33,400 obstacle. The doorbell rang, and on the new cameras I saw Eleanor with a steaming mug in her hands. I opened the door and she handed me freshly brewed coffee. "I thought you might need some company after everything you told me yesterday," she said with that genuine smile I had already grown to appreciate. We sat in my living room and Eleanor shared more details from her own experience. "My daughter said exactly the same things to me that Lena says to you. You're like a second mother to me. We're special to you. Everything will be ours one day anyway." These are rehearsed phrases, Mrs. Richter. They learned them from the Emotional Manipulation Playbook. "Do you think such a playbook actually exists?" I asked, half joking. "Not officially, but they all seem to read from the same script." Chapter 1. Make her feel indispensable. Chapter 2. Create constant financial emergencies. Chapter 3. When she resists, question her mental health. We laughed, but it was bitter laughter. It was simultaneously funny and tragic to recognize such predictable patterns in our own children's behavior. "Did you ever feel guilty about cutting off the money?" I asked Eleanor. "Every single day for the first 3 months," she answered honestly. "But then I started seeing results. My daughter had to get a second job. Her husband stopped playing golf every weekend and started looking for additional work. They learned to live within their means. More importantly, they learned that I was a person, not a resource." That afternoon, I decided to do something I had postponed for years: visit my husband's grave. I always made excuses not to go because Max or Lena needed something urgent, or because the taxi fare was better invested in one of their emergencies. The cemetery was peaceful and beautiful. Robert's grave looked somewhat neglected because I hadn't been there to maintain it in months. I sat on the grass beside his headstone and talked to him as if he were alive. "Robert, my love, I think I lost myself for a while. After you left, I put all my energy into Max. I wanted to be the perfect mother, thinking somehow that would compensate for him growing up without a father. But I think in the process I forgot how to be myself." The wind blew gently, and for a moment I felt like he was listening. "Our son has become someone I don't recognize. Or maybe he was always like this and I refused to see it. His wife is, well, you know what she's like. The money you left for me to live peacefully, I spent it all taking care of them. But not anymore, my love. I've learned." I cleaned his grave, replaced the withered flowers with fresh ones, and stayed for another hour, simply enjoying the tranquility. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing home to solve a crisis for Max and Lena. When I returned home, 3 cars were parked outside my house again. My heart raced, but this time I was prepared. The cameras revealed Max, Lena, and 2 people I didn't recognize. Everyone appeared agitated, talking among themselves and pointing at my house. I didn't get out of my car. Instead, I called Mr. Weber. Mr. Weber, they're at my house again. This time they've brought more people. What should I do? Don't leave your car, Mrs. Richter. I'll be right there and I'm calling the police. After our conversation yesterday, I requested a temporary restraining order. They're not permitted on your property. Minutes later, Mr. Weber arrived along with 2 police patrol cars. I watched officers speak with Max and Lena. I saw my son gesticulating angrily. I saw Lena crying again, but this time her tears didn't affect me. One officer approached my car. Ma'am, you can exit safely. Your visitors are leaving immediately. As I stepped out of my car, Max shouted from the street. Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call police on your own son. Max, I replied with a calm that surprised even me. Family doesn't threaten lawsuits for mental incompetence. Family doesn't break into homes without permission. Family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs. Lena screamed from across the street. You're going to pay us everything you owe us. We have bills you co-signed. You can't just abandon us like this. Mr. Weber interjected. Mrs. Brooks, any future communication must go through my office, and I suggest you consult an attorney before making collection threats because my client has complete documentation of all payments she voluntarily made over 3 years. I watched them drive away in their cars, defeated but not surrendering. I knew this wasn't finished, but for the first time in this ordeal, I felt confident. I had professional help. I had emotional support from Eleanor. Most importantly, I had mental clarity about what was right and wrong. That evening, Eleanor invited me to her house for dinner. I met her visiting daughter and witnessed firsthand what a healthy family relationship looked like. They spoke respectfully to each other, asked sincere questions about each other's lives, and laughed together. The daughter didn't ask for money once the entire evening. I wanted that with Max too, I confessed to Eleanor after her daughter left. Maybe you'll have it one day, she replied. But first, he needs to learn that you're a person deserving respect, not just an income source. For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling hopeful about the future. The following days were strangely peaceful. The surveillance cameras showed Max and Lena driving past my house multiple times daily, sometimes slowly, sometimes parking briefly, but never getting out. It was as if they were studying my routine, searching for the perfect moment for their next move. Mr. Weber had advised me to document every visit, so I kept a detailed log with dates and times. Their persistence will work in our favor, he had said. Every time they appear after being told to stay away, it strengthens our case for a permanent restraining order. On Friday morning, I was peacefully having breakfast when the doorbell rang. The camera showed a well-dressed young woman with a folder and a professional smile. I didn't recognize her, but something about her posture indicated this wasn't a social call. Good morning, Mrs. Renata Richter, she said when I opened the door. I'm a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services. We've received a report that you may be in an at-risk situation, and we need to conduct a wellness check. My blood chilled. Max and Lena had escalated the situation. It was no longer just threats from private attorneys. They had involved the government. May I see your identification? I asked, trying to remain calm. Certainly. She showed me official credentials that appeared genuine. I'm social worker Mrs. Schmidt. May I come in to speak with you? I let her enter, knowing refusal would have looked worse for my case. Mrs. Schmidt sat in my living room and removed a form from her folder. Mrs. Richter, we've received reports that you've shown significant changes in financial behavior, that you've severed communication with family, and that you've displayed signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also told you've refused medical and legal assistance from loved ones. Every word had been carefully chosen to make me sound like a mentally disturbed elderly woman. I recognized Lena's influence in the phrasing. She had always been skilled at manipulating language to achieve her goals. "Miss Schmidt," I said with all the dignity I could muster, "I'd like to call my attorney before answering questions." "Ma'am, this isn't a legal interrogation. It's a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, talking with me shouldn't be problematic." The phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," infuriated me. It was the same logic abusers used to justify their invasions. If you're innocent, you shouldn't mind having your privacy violated. "Miss, I'm calling my lawyer. You can wait here or return another day. But I won't answer questions without legal representation present." I called Mr. Weber, and he arrived within 20 minutes. When he entered and saw the social worker, his expression hardened. "Miss Schmidt," he said after checking her identification, "I hope you have a court order to be here because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment." "Sir," Mrs. Schmidt replied with less confidence than before, "we have reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being. It's our obligation to investigate." "What family?" Mr. Weber asked dryly. "The same family that tried to coerce her into signing a power of attorney without representation? The same family that broke into her house without permission and examined her private documents? The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money?" Mr. Weber retrieved a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. "Here I have complete documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. $33,400 withdrawn from her accounts over 3 years. Systematic social exclusion and emotional blackmail. If anyone needs investigation here, it's not my client." Mrs. Schmidt reviewed the documents with growing discomfort. It was obvious the information she had received didn't match the reality before her. "Mrs. Richter," she said finally, "can you explain why you so abruptly stopped financial support for your son?" "Because I finally realized they were using me," I replied simply. "Because I understood that to them I wasn't a mother but a bank account. Because I was tired of financing the lives of people who saw me as an obstacle." "But don't you feel it's your responsibility to help your family?" The question outraged me. "Miss Schmidt, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my son until 18, educate him, and provide tools for him to become an independent adult. My son is 35, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life isn't my responsibility. It's my choice, and I've chosen not to anymore." Mr. Weber interjected. "Miss Schmidt, would you consider it normal for a 35-year-old adult to be unable to pay rent without help from his 71-year-old mother?" Mrs. Schmidt didn't answer immediately. I could see her re-evaluating the entire situation. "Mrs. Richter," she asked after a moment, "do you manage your own finances completely? I can show you my bank statements, investments, tax payments. Everything is current and in order. Do you live independently? As you can see, I maintain my house. I care for myself physically. I drive my own car. I have healthy social relationships with neighbors. Do you take any medications?" "Just vitamins and occasionally aspirin. I have no medical conditions requiring medication." Mr. Weber added, "My client recently underwent comprehensive medical examinations as part of our legal process. She's in perfect mental and physical condition." Mrs. Schmidt closed her folder. "Mrs. Richter, based on this conversation and the documentation I've reviewed, I see no indication that you're at risk or need intervention. I'll close this case." After she left, Mr. Weber and I sat in silence for several minutes. "Renata," he said finally, "this will continue escalating. Max and Lena are spending money. They don't have hiring professionals to try having you declared incompetent. Does that mean they're desperate?" "Exactly that. What else can they do? They could file an incompetency lawsuit. It's expensive and difficult to win, but if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify in their favor, they could get a guardian appointed." The thought terrified me. They could seize control of my money. "They could try, but we have solid evidence that you're completely competent and that they're motivated by greed, not genuine concern." That afternoon, I called Diana to vent. "Sister," she said after hearing my story. Do you notice how far they're willing to go for money? They're risking family relationships, spending money on lawyers and investigators, destroying their own reputation, all to regain access to your bank account. Her words made me think. Max and Lena had completely revealed their true nature. There was no going back. No possibility of genuine reconciliation. To them, I had never been a mother or respected mother-in-law. I had always just been money with legs. This revelation, though painful, was also liberating. I no longer had to wonder if I was making the right decision. I no longer needed to feel guilty about protecting myself. They had proven that my emotional and physical well-being meant less to them than my money. That evening, Eleanor visited with a surprise. She had invited her garden club friends to meet me. Renata, she introduced me. These are my friends Cynthia, whom you know from the salon, Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda. We've all dealt with similar situations involving abusive family members. We spent the evening sharing stories. Maria had to set boundaries with a brother who constantly requested money. Carmen had severed her relationship with a daughter who only visited when she needed funds. Alfreda had to change her will after discovering her grandchildren considered her their retirement plan. What hurts most, I confessed, isn't losing the money I gave them, but realizing I never had the love I thought I had. Renata, Alfreda said with the wisdom of her 80 years, true love cannot be bought or sold. If you had to pay for it, it was never real. Her words were balm for my wounded soul. She was right. I had purchased attention, not love. I had financed an illusion. You know what I've discovered? I said to my new friends. Loneliness surrounded by people who don't love you is worse than being alone by choice. At least now when I'm alone, I'm in good company. Everyone laughed and we toasted our newfound wisdom. That night, after my new friends left, I sat in my garden thinking. The stars seemed brighter than ever, or perhaps I was seeing them with clearer eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely financially independent. I had no dependents, no financial obligations to anyone but myself. Instead of frightening me, this reality excited me. I could travel when I wanted. I could renovate my house. I could buy myself nice clothes. I could donate to charities important to me. I could invest in my own future instead of financing the present of ungrateful people. Freedom tasted like hope. For the first time in years, I wanted to plan my future. A month after the social worker's visit, I thought I had finally won the war. I had settled into a beautiful routine. Peaceful breakfast, reading the newspaper, tending my garden, having lunch with Eleanor or other new friends. Afternoons devoted to activities I had abandoned years ago. I had resumed painting, something I was passionate about before becoming Max and Lena's personal financier. But on a Thursday morning, while painting flowers on my new easel, Mr. Weber arrived with a grim expression that chilled my blood. Renata, we need to talk. Max and Lena have filed a formal mental incompetency lawsuit in family court. They're requesting appointment of a legal guardian. The words hit me like stones. I knew it was possible, but hearing it aloud made it terrifyingly real. Does that mean they can take control of my money? If a judge determines you're unable to manage your affairs, yes, he could appoint Max as your legal guardian, giving him complete control over your finances. I sat heavily on my sofa, feeling the weight of the deepest betrayal I had ever experienced. My own son was trying to legally declare me incompetent to steal my money. Mr. Weber, what evidence could they possibly have? You've seen that I'm completely competent. They have statements from 3 witnesses claiming you've behaved erratically. They've also submitted unpaid medical bills you supposedly didn't pay and medications you supposedly hoarded without taking them. But that's false. I have no outstanding medical bills or hoarded medications. I know, Renata, but they've fabricated convincing evidence. They also have a statement from Dr. Lehman asserting that you refused to cooperate with psychiatric evaluation, which they interpret as proof of mental decline. The manipulation was diabolical. They had twisted my refusal to undergo an unnecessary examination into proof of mental illness. They had used my instinct for self-protection as evidence I needed protection. Who are the 3 witnesses? Mr. Weber consulted his documents. Lena, obviously. A neighbor named Mr. Davis and someone claiming to be your pharmacist, Mr. Green. Mr. Davis was the neighbor across the street, an unpleasant man who had always had issues with me because my friends sometimes parked in front of his house. Mr. Green was indeed my pharmacist, but I couldn't understand what he could have against me. I need to speak with Mr. Green, I told Mr. Weber. Something isn't right. We went to the pharmacy together that afternoon. Mr. Green greeted me with surprise and nervousness. Mrs. Richter, good to see you. How are you? Mr. Green, I was told you signed a statement saying I show erratic behavior with medications? His face turned red as a tomato. Mrs. Richter, your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago asking about your medications. She said she was worried because you were acting strangely. What did you tell her? I explained that you only purchase vitamins and occasional aspirin, that you have no regular medical prescriptions, but she insisted this was proof you weren't taking proper care of your health. Mr. Weber interjected. Mr. Green, did you sign a document? She brought papers saying I was confirming Mrs. Richter had irregular medication purchases. I thought it was for her health insurance or something. I didn't know it was for a lawsuit. My own pharmacist had been tricked into signing something he didn't fully understand. Lena's manipulation knew no bounds. Mr. Green, I said, I need you to write a statement explaining exactly what happened and clarifying that I have no medication problems. Of course, Mrs. Richter. I'm terribly sorry for this misunderstanding. After the pharmacy, we confronted Mr. Davis. When we knocked on his door, he received us with obvious hostility. What do you want? Mr. Davis, Mr. Weber said. I understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior. That's right, I did. That woman is crazy. She's been acting strange for weeks. Can you be more specific about the behaviors you observed? Installing cameras like she lives in a war zone, having strangers visit constantly, yelling at her family in the street. I realized Mr. Davis had taken everything out of context. The cameras were installed for protection. The strangers were my new friends. The yelling was me defending my house from Max and Lena's invasions. Mr. Davis, I said, do you know why I installed cameras? No, and I don't care. To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law who broke into my house without permission and threatened me. That's what a crazy person would say, he replied cruelly. There was no reasoning with him. His statement was based on superficial observations maliciously interpreted. That evening, Mr. Weber and I planned our defense. Renata, we need our own psychiatric evaluation. I have a colleague, Dr. Moore, who's an expert in assessing mental capacity. She can officially confirm you're completely competent. What if Max and Lena have bribed the judge? What if none of this matters because they've already decided to declare me incompetent? Renata, the legal system isn't perfect, but it's not completely corrupt either. We have solid evidence of your mental competence and their financial motivations. We're going to fight this. The next day, I went to my appointment with Dr. Moore. She was a woman in her 50s with kind but astute eyes. Mrs. Richter, I'm going to ask you questions and administer tests to assess your mental capacity. Take your time and answer honestly. For 2 hours, she questioned me about my memory, reasoning ability, financial understanding, emotional health. She also gave me cognitive tests and asked me to solve mathematical and logical problems. Mrs. Richter, she said at the end, your results are well above average for your age. You're not only mentally competent, but your cognitive function is excellent. Doctor, why do you think my family is doing this? Based on what you've told me and the documents I've reviewed, this appears to be a classic case of elder financial exploitation. Unfortunately, it's more common than people realize. I left the consultation feeling validated but also sad. The professional confirmation of my mental health was relief, but it also confirmed the lawsuit was real and necessary. That afternoon, Eleanor organized an emergency meeting with all our garden club friends. When I told them about the incompetency lawsuit, everyone was outraged. Renata, Maria said, we'll testify on your behalf. We've been with you for weeks and anyone can see you're thriving. Better than thriving, Cynthia added. You're clearer and stronger than many 40-year-old women I know. Alfreda, with her 80-year-old wisdom, took my hands. Renata, my dear, what your children are doing isn't new. For generations, greedy children have tried declaring their parents insane to get their money. But you have something many victims didn't have: documentation, legal support, and friends who can testify for you. Her words gave me hope. I wasn't alone in this fight. I had an army of strong women who had witnessed my transformation firsthand. You know what's saddest about all this? I said. Max and Lena are willing to destroy any future possibility of reconciliation for money. Even if I were willing to forgive everything so far, there's no going back from this. Maybe that's for the best, Cynthia replied. At least now you know exactly who they are and can act accordingly. That night, for the first time since this nightmare began, I truly cried. Not from sadness but from grief. I was saying final goodbye to the son I thought I had, to the dream of a loving family, to the illusion that unconditional love was reciprocated. But something new also emerged within me. Iron determination not to let myself be stripped not only of my money but also of my dignity and freedom. The war had officially begun, but I was ready to fight. The trial came 3 weeks later. I woke early, put on my best black suit, and looked at myself in the mirror with determination I had never felt before. Today, not only my mental capacity would be judged, but my dignity as a person, my right to live free from abuse, my value beyond my bank account. Mr. Weber arrived at 7 in the morning to review our strategy one final time. Renata, remember, the burden of proof is on them. They must prove you're incompetent. We just need to show you're not. What if the judge is already biased? Judge Miller has a reputation for fairness. I researched his past cases and he doesn't automatically favor families. He's committed to protecting elderly rights. We arrived at the courthouse at 9. In the hallway, I saw Max in a new suit he probably bought for the occasion and Lena dressed in black as if attending a funeral. Maybe it was the funeral of our family relationship. When our eyes met, Max avoided my gaze, but Lena held my stare with coldness that confirmed this was just a business transaction for her. Their lawyer was an older, elegant man with the kind of confidence that comes from winning similar cases before. When he began his opening statement, his strategy was clear. Portray me as a confused old woman who had been manipulated by strangers to alienate me from my loving family. Your Honor, he said solemnly, Mrs. Renata Richter has shown clear mental decline in recent months. She has severed all financial support for her family without rational explanation. She has installed unnecessary security systems due to paranoia, and has isolated herself from loved ones under the influence of neighbors and lawyers, obviously taking advantage of her vulnerable situation. Every word was carefully chosen to make my self-empowerment sound like dementia and my freedom sound like external manipulation. Then they called their witnesses. Lena was first to testify, and her performance was Oscar-worthy. She cried describing how I had completely changed, how I had become hostile and paranoid, how I had isolated myself from the family that loved me. Your Honor, she said in a trembling voice, Renata has always been like a second mother to me. Seeing her mental decline has been devastating. We just want to help her get the care she needs. Lies wrapped in convincing tears. When Mr. Weber cross-examined her, cracks in her story became visible. Mrs. Schuster, can you tell the court when you last called my client without asking for money? Lena stammered. Well, we always discussed many things. Can you give me a specific date? I don't remember exact dates. Is it true that you and your husband married without inviting my client? It was a very small ceremony. Is it true that when my client asked about the wedding, you told her you had only invited special people? Lena's face reddened. Those words were taken out of context. What would be the proper context for telling your mother-in-law, she isn't a special person? She couldn't answer convincingly. Max was next. Seeing him on the witness stand, swearing to tell the truth while preparing to lie about my mental health, was one of the most painful moments of my life. This was the boy I had raised alone, the one to whom I had dedicated my entire life. My mom has always been very generous with us, he testified. But lately she's become erratic and irrational. We believe she's being manipulated by people taking advantage of her. When Mr. Weber cross-examined him, the mask fell completely. Mr. Richter, how much money have you received from your mother in the last 3 years? I don't know the exact amount. Does $33,400 sound about right? Maybe. She's always been generous. How many times have you visited your mother without asking for money? The silence was deafening. Is it true that you and your wife broke into my client's house without permission and examined her private documents? We were worried about her. Is it true that you brought a lawyer to pressure her into signing a power of attorney? We wanted to help her manage her finances. Do you, at 35 years old, need help from your 71-year-old mother to pay your rent? Max couldn't answer with dignity. Mr. Davis testified about my supposed erratic behaviors, but when Mr. Weber asked for details, he admitted he had never spoken to me directly and that all his information was based on superficial observations. Dr. Lehman testified that my refusal to undergo evaluation was proof of mental decline. But Mr. Weber submitted documentation of our evaluation with Dr. Moore, which completely refuted his conclusions. Then it was our turn. Mr. Weber first called Mr. Green, my pharmacist, who explained how he had been tricked into signing a statement that distorted my medication purchasing habits. Dr. Moore testified about my excellent mental state and presented the cognitive test results, which had been flawless. Mr. Summer from the hardware store testified about my mental competence and explained that my decisions to cancel automatic transfers were completely rational and properly processed. Eleanor and my garden club friends testified about my clarity, my newfound vitality, and my ability to maintain healthy social relationships. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I stood with dignity and walked to the witness stand, feeling the weight of 71 years of experience, of wisdom gained through pain, of strength discovered in adversity. Mr. Weber guided me through my testimony, letting me tell my whole story. The $33,400 spent in 3 years, the humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the constant emotional manipulation, the violation of my privacy, the legal threats. Mrs. Richter, Mr. Weber finally asked, why did you decide to stop financial support for your son and daughter-in-law? Because I finally understood that what I was receiving from them wasn't love, I replied in a clear, strong voice. It was a commercial transaction disguised as a family relationship. My money was welcome, but I as a person was not. Do you regret your decision? I only regret that it took me so long to make it. Max's lawyer tried to make me appear confused during cross-examination, but I answered every question with clarity and precision. When he tried to imply that my new friendships had manipulated me, I explained that for the first time in years, I had relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial interest. In his closing argument, Max's lawyer insisted I was a victim of external manipulation. Mr. Weber's rebuttal was devastating. Your Honor, what we've seen here isn't the case of an incompetent old woman, but of a woman who has finally found the strength to free herself from years of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs have presented no real medical evidence of mental incompetence. What they have presented is frustration because their income source has decided to exercise her legal and moral right to protect her own resources. Judge Miller retired to deliberate for 2 hours that felt like 2 years. When he returned, his expression was serious but clear. After reviewing all evidence presented, he began, it is obvious to this court that Mrs. Renata Richter is in full possession of her mental faculties. Professional psychiatric evaluations confirm her cognitive competence. Her financial decisions, however painful they may be for her family, are completely rational and within her rights. My heart began beating faster. Furthermore, the judge continued, the evidence suggests this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest rather than genuine concern for Mrs. Richter's well-being. The court completely denies the request for guardianship. I had won. I had not only won the lawsuit but also my freedom, my dignity, my right to live free from abuse by those who supposedly loved me. When we left the courthouse, I saw Max and Lena talking angrily with their lawyer. Lena gave me a look of pure hatred before walking away. Max looked at me one last time, and for a second I saw something that could have been regret, but it was already too late. That night, Eleanor organized a celebration at my house with all our friends. We toasted to justice, to freedom, to the sisterhood of strong women supporting each other. Renata, Alfreda told me, today you didn't just win a trial. You won back your life. She was right. For the first time in years, the future was completely mine. I could travel. I could love. I could create. I could live without fear, without guilt, without manipulation. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved to a beautiful apartment near the city center. I donated half my money to organizations protecting the elderly from family abuse. With the other half, I began living the life I had always wanted. I traveled through Europe, took art classes, joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Max and Lena again. I learned from others that they had to move to a smaller apartment, and that Lena had found a job for the first time in years. Perhaps adversity would teach them what my generosity never could: the value of honest work and independence. Some nights when I look at the stars from my new balcony, I think about the woman I was a year ago, fearful, manipulated, believing I had to purchase love. That woman is dead. In her place, someone has been born who understands a fundamental truth. True love never has a price, and freedom is never too expensive. My name is Renata. I am 72 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I must love and protect is myself. If you found my story meaningful, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to subscribe to hear more stories like this one. There are many other journeys of courage and self-discovery waiting for you here. Until next time, remember that it's never too late to reclaim your life.